Hello everyone, Sound Author again. I've been promising this tutorial for a while, and I found a way to use Hive's delay as a sort of pitch shifter. It's not an actual pitch shift effect, and as far as pitch shifting goes, this is going to be very crude. But there are a few different ways that you can utilize this pitch shifting technique. And right now I've got a preset that is included in a library that I've got on the way. No idea when it'll be finished, hopefully sometime this holiday season. But this is one of the examples of what you can do with this pitch shifting in the form of a big, huge, shimmery pad. And here's what that sounds like. Okay, so that's just one example of what you can do with this pitch shifting technique. There are other applications. You can use saw waves to modulate the time scale of the delay right there. Or you can use triangle waves. I've noticed that the triangle waves tend to kind of you'll hear another pitch, you'll hear a second pitch, and then it'll go away, and then it'll come back and go away again. So it's almost sort of like a gated pitch effect. And I first noticed that. Here, let me put my headphones on because I have latency. Okay. So I first noticed that when I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could modulate the time scale of the delay in some way? And I noticed it in the menu here, time scale. You can also drag and drop right there. Boom, done. And let's just make it stereo. Same time on both sides. Let's just go with a quarter. I first noticed this when I decided to use a triangle wave. And I was just running a saw through it, starting in a knit patch. And this happened. Okay. What is that? What just happened? Okay, so I obviously, when I turned it down to 50%, or negative 50%, I immediately heard an octave. And so there are other things you can get. You can turn it to different values, and you can get a fifth, you can get a whatever you want. I have not figured the exact times with the LFOs in tandem with the delays for figuring what pitches, but I will probably write a paper for that. Right now what I've got is a guide to help you find out octaves and fifths using saw up and saw down waveforms within the LFOs. And this is just with, really round generic values like negative 100%, negative 50%, positive 50%, positive 100%, using bipolar or unipolar saw waves up or down. And I'll make that available to everyone. So this is very useful. So I started experimenting a little bit more with this, and I found that My preferred method of shifting pitch is not with a triangle wave, but with a saw wave. I prefer to use saw up, but you can use saw down if you want to, and you can do bipolar or unipolar. I like to use a unipolar saw up waveform. And at a mod matrix value of a negative 50, it will be twice the speed of the LFO, will be twice as fast as the delay time if you want an octave. And that sounds like this. Okay, and obviously that sounds really grainy, and you hear, these clicky artifacts, and that clicking that you're hearing is the result of the waveform in the LFO resetting back to zero phase. And there is a very noticeable click. So like I said, this is going to be very crude. It's not going to be a really polished pitch shift effect, but it is useful. There are a couple of different directions to go in. One obvious direction is for the use with big, huge, shimmery pads like I showed you. The only downside is the only way to really mask that click is to completely slather this sound in reverb, 100% wet. If it's not, you're going to hear it right away. And of course, that click is going to produce a noticeable amount of noise. So your shimmer sounds are going to have some noise in them. Like I said, it's a kind of a crude way of going about pitch shifting, but it is very useful, and it sounds pretty cool. But there's another way to go about it. If you want something rhythmic, there are ways to embrace that click. Actually, I've made a few presets that make use of that clicking sound. I believe this preset. I've got a really fast tempo here. Slow that down. What else do I got? I believe this one. Yeah, it's a good example. And you can see right away that I've got a saw up waveform modulating the time scale, but you'll notice something else here. LFO2 is scaling that modulation, and you'll notice that the speed of LFO2 is obviously half of a quarter is a quarter of 1/8. You can mess around with stuff like that. Let's go back to an init waveform or preset. Okay, so another thing that you can do, and let's just go with 1/8 this time. Stereo, always stereo. You can mess around with ping pong when you do a combination, and I'll show you that right now. Actually, that way you can get like a fifth and an octave. So you can do this. I'm gonna use this saw up again. Unipolar. I'm going to go with 50%, negative 50% again. LFO1. And let's make it twice as fast for an octave with a unipolar saw up. It's always, LFO speed is always twice as fast as the delay time. But I believe, here, this is an octave. Oh, I've got to turn the delay on, duh. Okay, and I think if you had the same speed in this situation, it would be a fifth. I believe it will be a fifth. Yep. Okay, you can do a combination of a fifth on one side and an octave on the other. And that might not sound very interesting, but it gets a little interesting. I prefer pong ping instead of ping pong. They kind of feed into each other. And I'm going to use a sine wave because this pitch shift is more noticeable when you're using a sine wave. Believe it or not, you don't need a lot of harmonic content feeding into this. The pitch shifting, especially if you've got lots of feedback, is going to give you your sparkly, glittery stuff. Okay. Okay, so. Okay, that doesn't really start to sound very interesting until you either slather it with reverb or you modulate things with another LFO, scaling the depth of modulation. That's in a second. I just want to show you what you can do if you smear reverb all over this thing. Okay, I like it all the way there and somewhere around 90. And mix is going to be 100% wet. I want 100% wide. I'm going to turn the dampening all the way down. So let's go ahead and give that a boost. Maybe I will turn that mix down. All right, and you can mess around with feedback. All right. Okay, I've got another preset in the Plux. Twinkly chimes, there it is. Okay, and you can sort of hear this. You can sort of hear it if you listen closely. You can hear it, but it's not that noticeable at first. Okay, so you got to experiment with a little bit. So that is the let's smear the whole thing with reverb kind of approach. Go back to a knit. You can also use a bipolar LFO, but if it's at like -50, then an octave would equal the delay speed. So let's just go stereo again, 1/4, bipolar, saw up, and this is one way to go about it because it's easy to remember this, the same speeds. So da 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 and da 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 and -50. Oh yeah, turn the delay on again. Burp, burp, burp. Okay, so there's your octave. So you got that click in there. So I've noticed you can do some cool stuff with square wave modulations, gating this effect. So we'll have the square wave, low-high unipolar square wave, gating this pitch shifting. So it'll snap from doing its pitch shifting thing to just being a delay. And let's see, I found that sometimes using the same speed works. Sometimes using a half of the speed or a quarter of it. You gotta mess around with phase and stuff sometimes. I haven't got it down to a fine science yet. You just have to mess around. Let's see what this does. Okay, let's turn the filter down. Okay. So that's doing something interesting. you can mess around with phase. Let's try 1/2. Okay, another thing. This doesn't always sync up with your DAW, and the reason for that is because you're using a saw waveform to modulate the delay time, and so when this LFO gates that pitch shifting and it snaps back to its synchronized delay time, the delay time has been offset by LFO1, so it may or may not line up perfectly with your sequencer, with your DAW sequencer. This time it does. And I find that most of the time having the speed of LFO2 at the same speed of the delay usually will help you avoid these weird things that happen when they're not the same speed. Okay, that sounds like it's synchronized, doing something kind of weird. Also, your low pass and high pass filters in the feedback path suddenly become really important. If you want to have really shiny, shimmery sounds, then okay, then you can turn your low pass filter all the way up. I've found if you want to avoid those harsh clicks, turning your high pass filter up to about 50% helps with bangy, clangy artifacts. Okay, so that sounds alright. Let's mess around a bit. See, it's you never know what to expect. Sometimes when you turn that diffusion down, it helps with the sort of graininess, and sometimes that sounds good because you get that kind of that grain delay kind of sound that everyone loves from Ableton's grain delay. It doesn't exactly sound the same, but sometimes you can get it kind of similar. Let's crank that feedback. Now, another thing that you can also do is you can gate that feedback with LFO2. Let's open the filter up a bit. Alright, and maybe you can mess around with the mix level of the LFO, or of the reverb. Let's do the opposite. Okay. Okay. Get fancy. Okay, and let's have LFO1 triggering mod 1. You know what? I like this. It's going somewhere. Work in progress. All right. Okay, so you can... It's a little clicky. I might not use it after all. I don't know. I'll mess with it and see what I can do with it. Yeah, you get clicks and pops, and it happens. But if you work with it a little bit, and you know, you experiment, you try some different LFO speeds, you mess around with the phase a little bit, and you just go back and forth. Maybe, you know, try experimenting with triangle waves. I'm probably going to make another one of these charts for triangle waves. And like I said, it doesn't have to be negative 50 or negative 100% in the modulation matrix. It can be, you know, like 66.67 or something. It depends on what you're doing. It depends on what you've got going. It depends on your delay times. It depends on your LFO speeds and whether or not you're synchronized. You can also do things using modulator mode in your ARP sequencer and use these CC values to go ahead and modulate something else or gate something else. I mean, one of the most exciting things about this method is that it opened up so many possibilities in sound design within Hive, just to be able to get shimmer effects coming out of a synthesizer that doesn't really have a shimmer effect in it, and I can't really think of another synthesizer that has a shimmer effect in it. So being able to do the whole shimmer thing within a synthesizer and get that kind of pitch shifted effect out of a delay module by modulating it this way is opening up a lot of doors for my own sound design for this preset library that I have on the way. And as you can see, it's going pretty well. Not all of these will be included, but this kind of thing is really exciting. I've never really been able to get a synth to do this, and so yeah, I'm excited about this technique, and hopefully you can get excited about it too, and make your own cool pitch shifty, shimmery, glimmery, sparkly, glittery kinds of sounds if that's your bag. Okay, so I hope you like this video. Bye.